Business success and career fulfillment are inextricably linked. You cannot sustainably have one without the other. The things that get you out of bed in the morning are very much aligned to your strengths. If you're doing all the right things and you're successful by every measure and you still feel like something's missing, there's a high probability you're running the wrong race. We need to be more open to experimenting and having fun. When was it illegal to have fun at work?
Right?
It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. Someone doesn't have to lose for you to win.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today, we have a very special guest, Tammy Alvarez, a former Wall Street executive turned powerhouse leadership coach and founder of the Career Winner Circle. Her and I connected a couple weeks ago about this awesome conference or UnConference that they're doing, which I'm very excited to hear more about. Tammy's on a mission to help professionals escape the grind and build careers and companies, which is very, very important. This is where ambitions thrive. If you've ever felt stuck on top, or you feel lonely at the top, or you feel like your success has to come at the cost of your sanity, this is the episode you've been waiting for. So make sure you pay attention. Tammy, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation for weeks now, so I'm
I
glad
love
we're
it.
finally here.
Absolutely, Tammy. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get right to it, right? Breaking the career success kind of myth. You spent decades leading the highest levels of Wall Street. What moments made you realize the systems were broken? Even as a top performer who was growing and learning and making good money, when did you realize, like me, that the corporate world is broken?
Pretty much every day, right? Or there's some really, really good, I think, anecdotal moments that show up regularly for us and where the system is broken. And these are situations now as a leader or on the receiving end, because I've been on both, trust me on that. But your good work isn't good enough. And if you feel like you're really just giving everything that you've got and it's still not getting recognized, or you're still getting passed over, or your ideas or your impact aren't able to be what you want them to be, then I think, the system isn't designed for that. And people call it politics, they call it, positioning, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, I think what the system doesn't allow for, which we as individual leaders and as business owners and entrepreneurs need to think about, is what is the thing or a few things that get us out of bed in the morning, regardless of what we do for a living? And then how can I apply that to the company's biggest goals? And our corporate systems aren't set up for that because we can't measure personal aspiration.
Yes.
Right? We've got titles, we've got job bands, we've got salary caps and bonus structures, but no one actually is putting the humanity back into the work that we're doing. And I think that's really where some of the big misses are in terms of why the system is broken.
I feel like you're absolutely right. With the corporate world, the bigger the company is, the more the motivation from the company, the way they motivate is with let's say higher comp, bonuses, promotions, things like that. But a lot of that it's not intrinsic, right? So it's not really going to motivate someone permanently. And it's very difficult to get to know every single employee's actual motivation. It's a lot of work, and it's deep work, and it's challenging work that someone would have to do to really get to what you're describing. And a lot of these companies just don't either care enough or don't have the bandwidth or the willingness to do it because there's bigger fish to fry, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so interesting. So Gallup did two different surveys that I thought were really interesting. One was looking at global knowledge workers and asked the question basically of how satisfied are you with your job? That number was 80%.
Wow.
Which was significantly higher than I thought it would be.
Yes.
However, the next question, a little bit further down the road, same year, was how much do you actually care about what you're doing? That number went down to 20%.
Wow.
We have 60% of our workers that are just mailing it in. And we may be those people ourselves.
Wow.
The job's not that bad. I don't have to go back to work. I don't have to RTO all 5 days, just 3. My boss is okay. The comp is okay. But what I call the apathetic haze, this 60%, it kills careers and it kills companies. And we've got 20 years of data that prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that focusing on employee engagement does not work. Yet we spend trillions of dollars, hours, all of these things trying to focus on employee engagement. And so we're trying to solve the right problem with the wrong answer.
So what
And
is it? What does work if that
yeah,
doesn't work?
exactly. And so what we're getting back to is tying into that ambition, right? And what we talked about before is we have to understand that business success and career fulfillment are inextricably linked. You cannot sustainably have one without the other. And so as individuals, when you look at yourself and how are you leaning in, like, am I doing the things that light me up every day, or as much of that as I possibly can? And as leaders looking at your team, you know the ones that just, they have room to run, they're just not taking that initiative. And yeah, you're right, it's hard, but it's necessary. And when you do that, because one person's not managing 100 people, right? You've got maybe span of control 15, 20 at the tops. So you mean to tell me that you can't really get to know the 20 people that work for you and understand really what gets them excited and what gets them fired up, and let them do more of that.
So it's basically what I just mentioned. It sounds like, right? It's understanding their actual ambitions and their actual desires and their purpose and what they want to achieve. And unfortunately, it's probably 20 people and 7 different things, right? And they're not all going to be motivated by money, but not some of them will be highly motivated by it. Some with the titles and the growth and this, some by the impact, some by legacy, some by something else. So understanding each one's is the point that you're making.
Yeah. And there's this one time I inherited a very large team. I had about 10 leaders. They each had, about 100, 150 people under them. And so this team that I inherited, I tried everything I could possibly think of. I could not get them to lean in on anything. Meetings, offsites, planning sessions, all the things, nothing. And essentially what the function was is they did the same 5 or 6 things for different parts of the world. And so I finally brought them all together and I'm like, it's clear that none of you actually care about any of this. So, they just started to laugh because, let's call a spade and get the elephant out of the room. And so I'm like, let's find a new way to do this. And long story short, after a few days together, here's what I realized. And here's what they realized most importantly. Like, one of them was just, they ate strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They loved it. And that was a part of their job, but not all. Another one was a data nerd, right? And they just love to chunk up data and just use all of that to help make their business decisions. Another one was very customer focused, right? In terms of onboarding and customer service. And so long story short is these 10 leaders had passion in one specific area of their area of responsibility. So I was like, all right, what if you drove strategy for everybody? And what if you drove data for everybody? It didn't require HR. There was no rebanding. There was none of the politics that goes on because we were able to move the teams under them into functions they loved. And I was concerned about complexity because the handoffs would be much more difficult, stakeholder management, all that stuff. It all worked itself out because they were doing more of what they loved every day.
Wow.
It took 2 days to solve a problem that had plagued that organization for almost 4 years.
Tammy, now, did you find it doable in a group setting? Because it sounds like something that if you did it one-on-one, you would get more of the truth, especially when it came to those are more functional areas of passion, right? But how about what motivates me as a human being and what I want more of, less of? I don't know if people would be as open in a group setting to discuss the fact that I don't care about money, I want more time off. Or, I don't care about this, I want more leadership opportunities and growth. I feel like that was more of a one-on-one conversation.
Absolutely. No question. And it's about building trust, right? And how do you build trust? You actually treat them like a human being, right? And not just, hoping AI is going to solve everything for us someday in terms of people management. And so it's not only just building trust between a leader and the people that are on your team, but building trust with your colleagues to know it's a safe place. Right. And understanding really what gets them motivated and what gets them out of bed. Because typically the things that you have personal aspirations about, keep motivation aside for a second, because I think that's a little bit different. So the things that get you out of bed in the morning are very much aligned to your strengths. And then those strengths tend to be the things that fall into, okay, these are the things I love to do, right? Work and personally, because this feeds, this feeds me, this fills my cup in a variety of ways. And when they're getting that personal gratification off of things that they're doing,
Yeah.
and they see this, so what? They know it's connected to something that's really important to the organization, then they start to see the why behind the what. And I think connecting those dots for your teams are really, really important.
Great. That's great. Many leaders, I feel like, chase impact but find themselves stuck. Why do you think high achievers are especially prone to this issue and prone to burnout cycles where they just at one point they're done?
Yeah, I got there. Right, I remember the day that that my corporate career received what I call a terminal illness, called I don't give a shititis. So I totally I know how that plays, and I think um, when we're chasing impact, that's important. But I see too many really, really smart and talented people that are in the low value business. They're chasing impact on the wrong things.
Okay.
And so I'll give you an example, right? So one of my clients, Deirdre, she was in a department for a really long time. And there was a promotion that came up in the department. Everyone thought she was a shoo-in, including her. Guess what? She didn't get it. So that's why she came to me, because she's like, I'm out. And I'm like, hang on a second. There's always something to learn. And so we went through what she was doing. She's like, I'm doing twice as much work, all of these things. And so we went through all the things that she did and all the things that the person who got the job did. She was right. She did twice as much work. Then we aligned what they were doing to the company's top priorities. And she had the majority of what she was doing was what I call doormat projects, things that no one wants to do because they're not important. Whereas the person that got promoted, that was the person who spent, most of the things that he was doing was directly connected to
Sure.
the company's biggest priorities. And so, like, it's not you. You've got to get out of the low value business.
Interesting. So
And
she was being a great team player by taking on so many things. He had the high visibility projects that the executives, gave a shit about, frankly.
yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Wow.
Right. And then you wonder why you're on the outside looking in, and it's that connection to the top priorities. And I've led teams everywhere from sales to audit and everything in between. And so you always need to be able to connect back to the top priorities, whether you're far away in audit where you're like, okay, we're the sales prevention machine here. So how do we connect back in a positive way versus, sales, which is a, much more direct and straight contribution. But you've got to understand where your organization and where you as a leader make that impact and make sure that that's the stuff that you're trading on every day.
Tammy, I really liked what you did in that scenario because you could have easily gone in different ways, right? You could have done ruinous empathy, I think it's called, right? Where it's like, hey, you know what? It's just, what can I tell you? It's a man's world. Of course, they gave it to the guy, and you deserve better. You should leave. I think you did what you were supposed to do. You radical candor. You challenged her directly because you probably had the right relationship, and say, wait a minute, let's actually look at what you're doing. You're probably amazing, and it does suck that you were passed on, and you do work double as hard, but I really like what you did, because that's not happening enough, and that's actually one of the main reasons people are stuck, because they're constantly getting bad advice.
Yes.
Right? They're getting bad advice from their colleagues, their friends, their spouses, because we just want to be, not because we're bad people, it's just we see one side. We see our friends working their butts off and we get pissed, and we're like, hey, they don't deserve you. But someone needs to lean in and say, wait a minute, let's look at stuff. So that's very, very important.
And even more importantly, once we got that, we talked about how do you go into your boss and say you're no longer in the low value business and ask for, their partnership in helping you get out of that. And, and she literally brought the work we did together and say, I now know why I got passed up. And, I take on too much as a team player, but the wrong things. And I need to get out of that low value business. And they really respected the fact that she challenged that and said, I get why I got passed up this time, but that's not going to happen again.
What were the results long term?
Ultimately, she ended up getting promoted outside of her department.
Mm-hmm.
So in another kind of a sister function that partnered with the department that she was with. And so they realized, and she advocated for herself. And I think that's half of it. Like, we just expect people are going to do the right thing. And if you're not your own advocate, no one's going to do it for you, right? No one cares about your career, your livelihood, and your ability to make an impact more than you do. And so once she advocated for herself, not in an emotional way, but in a factual way, saying, I get it. And these are the things I need your help correcting because I need to get these off my plate so I can do things that are more meaningful. Then that became more of a consultative conversation with the executive team. They liked how she thought, and they're like, we can use you over here.
Very good.
So, it went from a blind spot to a superpower for her.
Now, Tammy, on that end, you helped the executive that was being passed up on. Let's talk a little bit about, like, you've also helped 100 companies reignite team performance.
Yes.
Where do most leaders go wrong when they're trying to re-engage their talent? Because what I'm looking for is redesigning leadership to reignite that engagement. Because people go through their ebbs and flows, their motivation, their lack of motivation, their family stuff. There's always things going on, but how do you reignite it with the right people?
Yeah, and reignite is exactly the right word because no one starts a job saying, I can't wait to hate this. Right? No one does that. It's like, I can't wait for this to suck. But 6 months tops, right? I'm going to hate it. No one does that. And so it was there. You can get it again. And I think here's the biggest problem I see, particularly in, middle market organizations, because I think large corporate has fundable resources and they don't really care. Let's be honest, right? They do what they have to do, but this is not a top priority for them. Yet middle market has the most to win or lose from it. And the problem I see so many companies make is they look at this as a one-dimensional problem. And it's not. It's easy to fix, but no one is spared. So for example, a big part of what we teach, both private clients that come to us at all, at the executive and senior level and organizations, is we teach individuals how to become the CEO of their career. How do you treat your career like a business and then start to play to your strengths? And so we do that. But then the other part we have to solve for is how do you make sure your leadership team doesn't screw that up? Right? Between insecurities and wanting people that aren't better than them on their teams and all of these other messy things that we do. So how do you get your leadership team in a way where they're leveraging that as a strength, not trying to squash that as a threat? And then equally as important is the executive team and the board. And is the tone from the top, are the things that you're measuring, are the things that you say are good, is that taking the organization in the right direction of travel? Because many times it's not.
Give us some examples so we can kind of have an image of it.
Yeah, so I'll give you some HR examples and I'll give you some business examples. Like things that make zero sense that come from the top are dumb things like you can't post for a new job until you've been in your current job for 2 years.
Within that same company, yeah?
That's correct. Like you got to stay here for 2 years before you can post within the company. That's a great way to get your top talent to leave.
Yes.
You get promoted, but we can't pay you any more than 20%, even though it's going to cost me 40% to hire somebody from the outside. These things that, we can only have 10% of the top producers, right? And everyone else has to be average, not if you do it right. I mean, yes, you have to balance, but, those are some HR things that just don't make sense, that just stop the people from leaning in and feeling like they've got something to do, right? So I think that those are some HR mistakes that are made from business leaders and business owners that are easily fixed. I think from from a more business perspective, where we're missing the boat and how you can reignite those team members that want to care. Like my big thing is like, we've got the zombie apocalypse in our companies, right? And companies don't want zombies and people don't want to be zombies. And if two groups that are so codependent want the same thing, why are we moving further and further apart? And the reason we're doing this is because we're not connecting to their ambition, which we talked about, but also to the why. So many people believe that the work that they do doesn't matter. And so if there's no so what to what you're doing, how long do you think you can sustain actually being excited about that? And so we need to do a better job at threading that needle for our teams to show them where their impact matters. Whether it's on customers, productivity, profitability, revenue, there is a so what to everything. And if there's not, then you don't need the role. And as leaders, we just assume people are making those connections and they're not. And we need to show up better and differently for our teams to be able to do that.
That's huge. Tammy, an individual a long time ago. I didn't quite understand why he wanted to leave this cushy job he had. And he didn't have to leave. And I kept like I didn't believe him, that he was actually looking to leave or he was hiding something. And I just didn't understand it. It was like, so what? So what? So what? Finally, he said, look, think of yourself or me as a musician. Imagine if all the music you made never got released. How would you feel? And this was a software engineering leader or something. And he said, I've been working on projects that basically just die before they're for no reason. And it feels empty. It feels really empty. I know I'm making good money. I know I'm a cushy job. You don't believe that I'm going to join this startup, but the truth is it feels empty. So that's where people don't value they don't believe what they do matters. It really, really matters to them. Right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, think about you as a business owner,
Yeah.
right? You've done the corporate grind. You know what that feels like, and now you make sure that none of those things ever enter your personal life. From a professional perspective, ever.
Mm-hmm.
I
make sure my team doesn't have to deal with that kind
Correct.
of politics. That's the one thing I'm big on.
Yeah. And so as business leaders and as sometimes owners, founders, wherever you're sitting, like it is our job to make sure that our teams understand why that matters and where those connections are, because then they're going to start to lean in and care a lot more. And it doesn't take much. And so I just, I love the idea, like when I left my corporate career, it was, you were mentioning like you couldn't figure out why that person was leaving, right? And I mean, I remember, sitting in that boardroom the day I got the terminal illness of, okay, I can't go to another company. It's just a different shade of lipstick on the same thing. And at the time I was, leading around 2,000 people, 35 countries, making big money, having the fancy apartment in New York. And I literally pulled the plug, cashed out, and moved to a tropical island off the coast of Belize in Central America to start this company. And this was the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my adult life. Mm-hmm. And so many people asked, why are you giving up? And so it was really, really interesting to me that was the idea, is that, you finally get to where everywhere, everyone wants to be, and then you're giving up. But here's something I want to ask, our listeners to really reflect on is, if you're doing all the right things and you're successful by every measure and you still feel like something's missing, there's a high probability you're running the wrong race. And so I would encourage you to check in on that, because our goalposts move. Yeah. And what we think and what we want for ourselves in terms of success, in terms of business impact, in terms of all those things, they change over time with our seasonality of our careers.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to continue to check into that, because I joke around saying I went from fancy to feral, living on islands.
That sounds awesome.
And it was we were scuba diving 3 days a week before work. Like it was definitely the reset I needed. But I just think we continue to go on autopilot for too long. And then suddenly we look up and we look around and we're like, what am I doing? But now we're older and we make a lot of money. And, we've got houses and spouses and kids in college, and we can't sell everything and become a barista and live in a yurt anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's where that stuck feeling comes from. Yeah. And I've seen it happen in executive careers, and I've seen it happen with business owners, where you become a victim of your own success. Sure. And so whenever you're getting that stuck feeling, chances are good you're running a wrong race and it's time to reassess.
Amazing. That's really good. Good way to look at it. And a lot of times externally, it doesn't make sense to the outsiders, right? Including your family members, right? I remember when I left Kaplan, I left to join a rebuild. And my wife just said, nope, yep, you got this. This is all you. I've always known, because she kind of really deep knew who I was, even though we were, just married. My mom was very confused. She was like, I don't, this doesn't make any sense to me. My brothers were like, wait a minute. So what? And so to you, it's like, there's outsiders, there's no logic behind it. It just doesn't make sense, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to. It's what you want to do, right? As long as you want to do it, it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. So it's really good.
Yeah. And as long as you're, I think one of the things that stops people from making those bolder moves or those moves that don't make sense is, let's face it, fear, right? It's like, what if I fail? What if this goes wrong? Like, we never have this moment of abundance when we make a big change.
Yes.
Nobody
Yes.
ever says, oh, what if everything goes right? We've got all these catastrophes in our mind that, okay, all of these things could go wrong. And there's a few things I want to, leave our listeners with in terms of how to think about fear. A lot of times, we are avoiding failure. We don't want to fail. But realizing that you cannot succeed without having failed. And so all the effort you're putting into avoiding failure, you're actually preventing success.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to take, to start to unpack that a little bit and really show up better for yourself and those around you is to really adopt that experimental mindset. Instead of having this fixed mindset of we're taking this hill no
Yep.
matter what, be a lot more fluid with what good looks like and how you get there. Because even if it were possible to make a good decision or a perfect decision today, even it's not, but even if it were, the dynamic nature in which we are navigating our world in, 5 minutes from now, that could be the worst decision ever.
Sure.
And you've got to have that insight to be able to make those adjustments and those changes. So when I made that move to Belize, I was like, okay, let's think about this. I'm starting a business. I've never done this before. My partner and I were dating casually for years and decided we actually liked each other. So we're going to live together for the first time. And I'm moving to a foreign country. What could possibly go wrong? So I called my mom and I'm like, listen, I may end up on your couch at some point if everything goes terribly wrong. You good with that? And she was
Yeah.
fine. I like my mom. So I'm like, okay, we're good. Knowing that, okay, if everything really went completely wrong, I had a backup plan. And so instead of staying stuck because of the what ifs, look at those, look under your bed and find out if they're really dust bunnies or monsters, because most of the time they are dust bunnies, and then you can take action because of that.
Huge. It's like in sports, right? In basketball, if a team's playing to not lose, you sense it. They're playing the clock down. They're just they don't want to lose. But instead of like let's just have fun and let's win. Let's go for the win, right? A lot of times we're living and working off of fear, right? Fear of failure, fear of like what happens, I've built this really nice life. Sometimes it's ego based, right? I can't start all over. I work at Google. How can I go work for a no-name company? How will I look to the outside world? Who cares, right? Do what feels good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah.
Very good. What, in your experience, what does leadership need to do in most companies to evolve to keep up with today's innovative cycle? I mean, things are moving 5 times faster than they were 5 years ago and 50 times faster than they were 10 years ago. So what do leaders both on the company side and on the individual side, what do they need to do to keep up with that pace or ideally lead that pace?
Something new is showing up for me, I would say, over the past maybe 6 to 9 months. And it's the realization, and this applies to, leaders who are in companies or leaders who are driving their businesses. But one of the things that's showing up big for me right now and my clients is that collaboration is the new competition.
Okay. Agree.
The idea that, you're a competitor and so it's one against the other, or, you're my colleague and we're both vying for the same promotion, whatever that may be, like things are changing too fast right now and no one can see around the corner. I am sorry, but, it is all bets off right now. This, dating myself, but, if you guys are watching on YouTube, it's not going to be a surprise, but this very much reminds me of the end of the 90s and Y2K. Because you had all these .com companies popping up and disappearing overnight with the shroud of disaster looming in that the fact that the world was going to end in 2000.
Yes.
Except now I think we really do have some massive headwinds, right? Not just manufactured by lack of knowledge, but we're in that same bubble with AI and with the economic and the tariff whiplash and all the things that are going on. Companies and individual leaders no longer can win alone. And when you can lock arms with colleagues, businesses, industries that can help you go to market in a much stronger way, you will withstand and sustain these headwinds.
Huge.
And, we're seeing that in so many different situations. Like, when we'll talk about the UnConference that we're doing, but I was headlong going to do this all by myself with my team. and I met this amazing person, and now we are locked arms and doing this together because it's going to be better together.
Amazing.
And when you see people that are navigating, I love from a business owner's perspective, if you can find those partners that overlap with what you do by about 20%,
Yes.
then you have got a powerful offer.
Especially if that overlap or especially if they can balance your weaknesses, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing, like for example, US, manufacturing companies, like middle market manufacturing companies repatriating their manufacturing
Yeah.
for certain things that they know sell more heavily in the US to avoid the tariff situation. And so instead of trying to do that on their own, they're partnering with people that make things similar to them and
Sure.
bring out how can we do that and how can we support each other. And so there's just so many different ways that we need to start to think differently about how we navigate the markets, how we navigate the economy, and how we navigate, co-opetition, right, and that collaboration. That is the faster you can get good at this, then the more successful you'll be, both personally as well as your business results.
Competition is healthy, but yeah, I mean, it's you can do both, right? You can compete while helping others come up with you, right? What do they say? Rising tides lift all boats,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So that's huge, and it's tough because internally we were taught to compete, and a lot of us entrepreneurs came from some competitiveness, whether it was
yeah,
sports or it was dance or it was whatever. We learned to compete, and we were told, and rightfully so, is like, no, 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 you don't smile at that guy until the end of the game, right? And you don't go
right.
hang
Yeah,
out with him before
until the end.
we're gonna kill each other then. And now you can play with them, you can compete with them. So it definitely is a different world.
Yeah, well, here's a fun fact, right? So I love board games, love them, and I am an absolutely horrible loser. Like if I competed well and lost, okay, but if I get my butt kicked, I am just not gracious at all,
Yeah.
and to the point where friends and family find it very funny. And then we were over in the UK visiting a friend, and he's also a big game player, and we played this game, and it was, I don't know what it's called, was it Virus or Contagion or something? It was before COVID. The game was produced, but this was recently. And here's how the game is played: you have to play together to beat the virus.
Oh, very
It's not
different.
head to head. And I actually had so much fun playing that game because you each had superpowers and all these other things.
Yeah.
And that's when it clicked, because I had been feeling those spidey senses for a bit, and I'm like, this is what it means. Right?
Blackjack. If you focus on blackjack, it's you
Yeah.
versus the dealer. It's you and five other people, so they're
Yeah.
helping each other out, and it's a
Yeah,
it's a
but only
very
one
different
gets,
energy.
but only
It
one
on-
gets caught.
no, not in
Oh, that's
blackjack.
true. That's
You're
true.
thinking poker. You're
Yeah.
thinking poker. Blackjack, everybody wins as long as the house loses,
Loses.
right?
Yes,
Well, not
exactly.
everybody together all the time, but
Yeah,
you help each other, right? There's no competing against each other, and no
exactly.
wonder when you go to Vegas, that's what you want to do with your time because it's more fun. High-fiving your people next to you is a lot more fun than staring them down and trying to read their minds, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I want us to think about this in business terms,
yeah,
right?
I
Like,
like it.
it doesn't have to be a zero sum game. Someone doesn't have to lose for you to win. And there is competition, right? We lose to competition, we win to competition, but when we've got those collaboration partners, then we've got a stronger offer. We're reaching more people. We're making a bigger impact. We have more diverse perspectives, and all of those things are going to be what we need to trade on in this emerging economy that we have.
That's nice.
Mm.
What when you were talked about Belize, you're I think in Mexico City now, and you traveled to
Yeah.
New York. You're all over the place. What surprised you most about like this pivot you did from structured executive position and prestige to freedom and entrepreneurship? Like, what was the key thing you were like, huh? Didn't think this would be a thing.
Um, so many things, right? I think some of the big ha's was detoxing from the addiction of being needed. Right? When you're managing big teams, you're doing all these things like your back-to-back meetings, 8 to 10 hours a day, lines out your door, when we used to work in offices and all those things. And then you start your own business and no one knows you're there at first, and no one actually, and so it's that adrenaline rush that you miss. And I
Yeah.
remember, because I spent a lot, 25 years building my life around my career. You know,
Mm-hmm.
my husband at the time was a stay-at-home dad. He was a trailing spouse twice, never said no to travel. Like that was just a life we led.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've flipped the script to where I purposely built a business around my life.
Mm.
But to be able to do that took a lot of unwinding.
Sure.
We are able to travel the world and do all the time by design.
Yeah.
I remember sitting on a dive boat, 8 o'clock in the morning because the reef was only 20 minutes, 10 minutes away, and we were back in the office by 10, feeling guilty until I'm like, who even knows I'm here? Who even cares?
Yeah.
I mean, earlier days when you're getting things started, like that was a big aha moment for me.
Sure.
And I think, um, as a coach, as a leadership development is helping companies, see that those companies succeed and those leaders succeed. That gives me more of a rush than I ever expected. And it gives me more of a sense of satisfaction than a good earnings report ever has.
Yeah.
And so I think just the things that I valued, the things that are important to me now, the impact and the things that I measure, success on are very different. And
Huge.
most people think if you start your own business and you're not working 24/7 that you're never going to make it. I've never worked more than 30 hours a week
Yeah.
because I won't let myself, right? And because I love this and I love work and I could do this all the time, but that's not the whole point of doing 2.0 of what I did the
Yeah.
first time.
Tammy, one of the things that if I'm on the outside looking in, I'm thinking that's awesome, but you're more of a solopreneur, so it's easy to said than
Not
done. I have a
anymore. Yeah.
nice, good for you. But like imagine I have so many friends that run companies that they're anywhere from let's say 5 million a year in revenue to 10 billion, right? I mean, talk about being a slave to your business as a leader. It's very, very difficult to left behind to be able to live with the freedom that you have. However, my advice to them, if you're listening in, is you can do it as well. Maybe not at the level Tammy's doing, where she's in the new country every year, but you absolutely, as long as you build a really good leadership team and a nice succession plan, you can leave and have a great time. I mean, last few years I've been able to go on vacation and just completely unwind and come back and nothing's broken. No, there's no fires, thank God, knock on wood, because I've built a really nice leadership team that they care about the company almost as much as I do. They care about their careers, they care about their team. Um, and so I don't have to be a slave to my business, right? And I'm not a solopreneurship, and nor are you now, obviously. But if anyone's thinking that there is a way around it, and if your company falls apart every time you leave for a week or two or a month, you're not there yet, right? You haven't developed your team enough. You haven't hired the right people. You haven't retained the right people. So, kind of go back to the drawing board on your succession plan. And when I say succession plan, it's not about exiting your retirement or whatever. It's about just when you're gone for a week, what happens? You know?
Yes. And too many leaders don't do what you just mentioned, which is exactly what we need to be doing,
Mhm.
and then are forced to leave through an illness or something like that, right? And so it's not a luxury item. It's a company viability issue.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think, especially founder operators, founder,
Yes.
led operators, they tend to be victims of their own success
Hmm.
and figuring out, okay, how do I let things, how do I make sure I've got the right team to be able to do this is not easy. And, because you said just a few years, you've been at this for a bit. So that leads me to believe that there's several years where you didn't take
Oh,
vacations and you felt
100%.
like
No, I took vacations, but it was stressful and I was connected
yes,
and I was
yes,
kind of working, checking in and yeah, I would come back and the people made a great effort, but there was fires that needed to be
yeah,
stopped and that was exhausting. So it was like, man, I'm stressed when I'm on vacation because I'm not fully disengaged. Then I come back and I have to deal with crap. So this is not fun.
yeah,
I
right.
really
Well,
need this vacation because I'm going to have to deal with the nonsense coming back. That's painful.
yeah, it is painful. And I think as as business owners and leaders, we need to think about and be very intentional on how much time we spend working in the business and how much time we spend working on the business. And so I'm very, very specific about like how much time I spend in the business. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I'm in it, right? I'm in with my clients, we're doing stuff like this, like I'm in it, right? The other 2 days, sometimes 2.5, depending on what Friday we're talking about, I'm working on. And so we can travel the world. And on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I'm working East Coast hours no matter what side of the planet we're on. But then those other 3 days gives me that flexibility and that lift. And so if you feel like everything is landing on your desk as a leader, this is a good way to start to pull that back
Hmm.
before you need it, right? So really be much more intentional on how much time you're spending in versus on. And then
Great.
when you're working on, let's see how the team is working in while you're still there, kind of having that command and control. And so I think a lot of that is just practice and refinement, but also having the right mindset in terms of accepting the fact that you can get the outcomes you're looking for, but it may not be the way you wanted to do it, and being okay
Very
with
good.
that.
Very good.
Yeah.
What's one truth about leadership that not enough people are willing to talk out loud about for whatever reason?
I think that it's lonely.
Hmm.
And I think part of the challenge with leadership is you're expected to have the answers, and a lot of people like to pretend that they do.
Hmm.
When, we think we can't be vulnerable. We think that we can't be like, oh, I don't know. Now, I got news for you. I've never been the smartest person in the room, right? And if that was the case, then we would not be talking today if I always made sure that I was, so
Yep.
that we would be in big trouble. And so I think having that internal awareness of what we're really about versus what we want people to think we're about, and what our strengths are, and being okay to say I don't know, or I'm not sure, let's try this and see.
Hmm.
And really, I think that's something leaders feel like, I think I've seen a lot of leaders feel like they don't have the luxury of doing. They have to be the stoic one. They have to be the certain one. They have to set that strategy. They've got to be the one that's, taking the troops in. When the reality is, most of the time, we're never sure.
Hmm.
And it's okay to say that, because I think
Yeah.
everyone knows it anyway. So you're not fooling anyone. And it just makes it a little bit better for everyone when you start to admit some of those things.
Well, it's healthier for you. It's healthier for them, and it just makes for a really nice environment, And we talk a lot about creating a safe environment for our employees, but how
Yeah.
about us, right?
Right.
Even with your family, right? As a father who reads a lot and is supposed to know a lot, as my kids get older and smarter, they ask me tougher and tougher questions, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know, and they're waiting for some lesson. Like they're like, all right, what psychological game are you playing? What do you mean you don't know? And I'm like, I literally
Like,
don't know.
seriously, I have no idea. Yeah.
I don't know what this math is. Your question is brilliant. I don't know. Have you even looked it up? Let's learn together,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's weird to them, but I think they're getting used to it where there are just things I don't know and I'm fine with it. It's
Well,
kind of
yeah, and I
enjoyable.
think, leaders, especially now with the rate of change with AI and the markets and everything else, it's like we need to be more open to experimenting and having fun. Like, when was it illegal to have fun at work?
Right?
And,
Well,
so
with
it's like,
all these crazy laws and rules and it's getting there, but yeah, it's we have to have fun.
yeah,
It's one huge thing. I mean, a couple of years ago, it's funny you talked about fun. A couple of years ago, we were really struggling, right? Like we come off of an Inc. 5000 fastest growing company, and then we're in this tech recession, and we're just having just bad quarter, bad year. And I think it was an advisor or board member is like, man, I've never seen like y'all are. I'm really like, if you guys are having a good time, like why wouldn't we, man? What do you mean? And he's like, well, you're struggling. I mean, you just told me how pissed you were. I'm like, that's not gonna change anything. Like, I don't want to be miserable on purpose. It's opposite. Let me turn the energy around. Let me let the room, like breathe.
yeah.
They're looking to us for that comfort that they can smile and they can still try things. And it was really, really good. I mean, we wouldn't have survived without it. Before that, there was a company called the Mitchell Group that my partner Jeff Mitchell and I worked together on during the 2008 and 9 recession. 8 and 9, remember those years? I mean,
Yeah.
we laughed and we goofed off and we had a good time, and that's how we survived, right? Because without it, it was depressing, right? It was
Oh
tough
my God.
times,
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
very important to have fun and smile and enjoy every day.
Well, and I think very few of us are saving lives or curing cancer.
Yep.
And yet we tend to manufacture this level of
Hmm.
criticalness and urgency in everything that we do.
Yeah.
And I find myself getting wrapped up in that once in a while, right? And so like a
Hmm.
team member, will misdeliver something or not hit it out of the park, and I'm like, and then I'm just like, you know what? We're good. It's all
Yeah,
right.
we're
Let's learn
alive.
from it to keep the good stuff. Let's rework the stuff that wasn't exactly as intended and keep going.
Huge.
But if you're not laughing, if you're not enjoying your time and the people that you're with, that's such an easy thing to fix.
Yes. Yes, it's huge.
Hmm.
If you could put one piece of advice on a billboard in New York for execs, specifically maybe tech executives, what would it be? What would you say to these
I
folks?
mean, if we're talking tech execs specifically, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think my biggest piece of advice is to understand the business. Just so many tech execs that I've worked with over my career, the excellent ones really understood the business
Hmm.
and protected me from myself because they did.
Hmm.
Right. Other tech execs were less business savvy, much more into the tools and toys. And so when I would come in and say, I want this, they never asked why
Mm.
or what am I trying to accomplish. And so, I think really understanding how the business works gives you that confidence and credibility to partner with your business sponsors to be able to help them get the results they want, because most of the time they're like me and think they know because they read an article somewhere,
Hmm.
and actually the total wrong idea.
Right.
And so I think understand the business from a tech exec perspective is probably the biggest thing that I would advise.
So you can tie your role within the bigger purpose. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, tech doesn't exist because it's, you know, just cool, right? It
Hmm.
exists to serve a business purpose. And so to understand exactly what that business is, how it makes money, how beyond the how does data flow and the data models and all that kind of fun stuff,
Sure.
but how, to what end? Because a lot of times I'm like, I need this. And they're like, why?
Yeah.
Well, this is what I can't see, or this is what I need. And this is the, demand we're trying to serve. I'm like, oh, hang on a second. We already have that. We already bought
Huge.
that. Or we can do this much easier and much, much more, comprehensively than the way, so I think, but for those that don't understand the business and don't understand like two steps ahead of where I'm trying to go and help guide me to making those right decisions, those were the ones that I took with me everywhere.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tammy, let's talk about this unconference because I know
Yeah.
it's a big event and you're planning it and you're doing it. Let's talk about it.
Okay. It is disrupted the unconference, and the whole idea is work reimagine the future of work type thing, and it's really geared towards middle market executives that are trying to navigate this space. It'll be in New York City on October 16th, and
Mm.
I want you to envision adult playground meets think tank.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so this is very much collaboration is the new competition. We've got three pillars of learning, AI, future forward leadership, and solving the talent equation. But we've got three speakers that are collaborating on each of those pillars, like one from science and academics, one that's an industry expert, and somebody from a more kinesthetic perspective to surround these issues versus, and it's very, very high action. We are going to take all the problems, all the right questions that you're asking and all the right problems that you're trying to solve and help you find new and better and more efficient ways to get those done. And so I'm just beyond excited to be able to bring this to the market in October.
What type of person would benefit the most from going to this conference and how do
Um,
they find it?
Yeah, and so C-suite executives, right? So C-level
Hmm.
leaders in middle market organizations, somewhere between 200 and 1,000 employees, roughly, is who will benefit the most from this. But
Interesting.
but at the end of the day, it's a small boutique event, so there'll be about 90 executives there. So this is not a giant cattle call
Hmm.
because we're really
Much better.
oh, yeah.
Much
Right.
better.
Yes, exactly. And you have that community, right? Because there's so many other leaders that are struggling with the same things. And the idea is that this community will continue to persist. Because how many times do we go somewhere, get all these great ideas, leave them on our desk and go back to the fires that blew up while we were gone, right? And we don't
Hmm.
get to do any of these things. So having that community, the accountability, we're thinking about a hackathon, in terms of being able to solve some of these issues. But the idea is that, again, no one wins alone. And this is going to be much more of a continuation within the group that we have than it is a one hit wonder. And
That's great.
and so for those leaders who know that work doesn't work, and that we need to find a new and a better way to do this to maintain our long-term viability. This is exactly the event you want to be at this year.
It's amazing. Amazing. Let me know how Higher Cloud can participate. They sponsor this show, and maybe they can sponsor a piece of that amazing.
Yes, we are actually calling for sponsors very soon. So good
Look
time.
at that. Look at that. Let's talk. It sounds like a great event. It really does. I feel like those mid-sized companies don't get talked about enough. Frankly, it's either startups from Fortune 500. So I think that's very valuable, right? I mean, if you hear about it, all we hear about startups because they're exciting and they're
Sexy,
spunky and funky, and they have to work really hard. And then you got the global companies everybody knows. No one's talking about these. One thing, Tammy, I thought maybe for your next one is, like the middle child that gets no love, you approach the mid-sized companies, but how about the mid-executives? Not the CEO or the CMO or whatever, but maybe those directors, senior managers, and early vice presidents. Sometimes they're kind of buried, right? They've got some crazy visionary like me that's pushing down our vision, and then you've got their employees, and they're kind of stuck in between, and they don't know how to. So like exactly. Maybe next conference focuses on them.
I love that idea. And, once we get this first one under our belt, because this actually stemmed from a virtual conference that we did last year. So we did, Disrupted the Future of Work. And I didn't even want to do it last year, but my coaches made me. Like, come on, let's do this. This will be fun. I'm like, that's not the word I would use, but okay, we'll do this. And, we had about 40 speakers, 300 attendees. And I'm like, actually, this was a lot of fun.
Wow.
And so now that kind of spawned into, let's do something live and much more bespoke and dialed in a bit. But the framework of the playground, of learning in a very dynamic and multidimensional way and applying that in a long-term cohort type base. I think that's going to play in a variety of different ways, because you're right, the middle market, there's so much need. So whether it's broken down by industry, so you're really leaning in, whether it's broken down, in other countries, we've got some interest in Australia and, some things in Europe possibly, and, and bringing it down to that level, or maybe it's just HR professionals. So there's so many ways we can do this as we start to really bring this impact. But at the end of the day, people who come, their businesses will be transformed, and so will themselves and their teams. And that's what we're looking for, is making that long-term impact on driving the way work gets done.
Amazing. I love it. Where can listeners learn about your work, your book, catch one of your keynotes, or maybe even go to this conference?
Yeah. So the best place to start with is careerwinnercircle.com. That is the center of all the good stuff. There you'll see, the way to access the conference, and we're going to be opening up the wait list very soon. So, so next week, I think, is when we're going to open up the wait list before we get started with registration. And then also you can get links to the book and stuff, which, by the way, was featured on Times Square last Sunday.
Wow. And the book was Escaping the Career Trap, right?
That's right. Escaping the Career Trap, transform your apathy into ambition and never hate Mondays again. Wow. And it was nice seeing those golden handcuffs just live and lit up on Times Square. So that was kind of
That's
fun.
Really cool. Congrats on that. We forgot to talk about the book, but I'm sure it's awesome, and I plan on reading it. I've got a stack of books I have to read. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's on audio too, so if you're a listener, you can do that too. It's nice, get it all the places. Yeah. But really at the end of the day, we are all about helping people love Mondays again. And it's not a pipe dream. It's not an aspiration. It is something that we can do. So if you're waking up in whatever role you're in, whatever capacity you're in, and that Sunday night, you just start to get that pit in your stomach saying, I cannot suffer this another minute, then that's who we help.
That's huge. Guys, you heard it. Tammy, thank you so much for being here and bringing such bold insights. For anyone feeling like you're surviving instead of thriving, this conversation is a wake-up call. So check out the episode. Go to this awesome conference. Read Tammy's book. Tammy, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you.
For a great conversation. Thanks for your time today.
Take care.
Bye.
And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate it if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avita Santoblian, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.